It was late afternoon when Daniel Turner decided to take the long road home. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the quiet countryside. Daniel enjoyed peaceful drives like this, the kind that gave him time to think about life, work, and how fast time was passing. He had no idea that this ordinary drive would soon turn into something unforgettable. The road ahead was almost empty, and Daniel was humming along to an old country song on the radio. Suddenly, something caught his attention. A silver car stood parked on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking fast. A woman was standing beside it, waving her hands desperately. Daniel slowed down immediately, his instincts telling him someone needed help. He parked a few feet ahead and stepped out of his truck. The air smelled like hot asphalt and dust, and the wind carried a faint chill. The woman looked to be in her mid-30s, her hair messy, and her face full of worry. "Please, can you help me?" She called out, "My tire's flat, and I don't know how to change it. My phone died." And no one stopped. Daniel gave her a calm smile. "It's okay, ma'am, I'll take a look," he said kindly. He knelt down beside the car and quickly confirmed what she said. The tire was completely flat. He asked if she had a spare, and she nodded, pointing to the trunk. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, and he noticed she kept glancing up and down the road nervously. While Daniel worked, loosening the bolts and lifting the car with the jack, the woman stood nearby, trying to make small talk. "I'm Rebecca," she said softly. "I was driving back from my sister's place, and I guess I hit something sharp on the road. I've been stuck here for almost an hour. I thought no one would stop." Daniel nodded as he tightened the spare tire. "Well, lucky for you I came this way today," he replied with a small grin. The sun continued to dip lower, painting the sky pink and gold. Sweat ran down Daniel's forehead, but he didn't mind. He was used to fixing things, cars, fences, or just helping out neighbors when they needed a hand. When he finished, Rebecca sighed with relief. "Thank you so much," she said. "You really saved me." She reached into her purse, trying to offer him some cash, but Daniel raised his hand, shaking his head. No, keep it. Just be careful driving home," he said gently. Rebecca hesitated, her eyes filling with emotion. "People don't usually stop anymore," she whispered. "You must be a really good man," Daniel chuckled, embarrassed by the compliment. "Just doing what anyone should do," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. He wished her a safe journey, then walked back to his truck, not realizing that this small act of kindness would soon bring something far bigger than he imagined. As Daniel drove away, he glanced once more in the rearview mirror. Rebecca's car was already back on the road. Heading in the opposite direction, everything seemed fine, yet a strange feeling tugged at his chest, like something unfinished. He brushed it off, telling himself it was just fatigue. When he reached home, his little house stood quiet on the edge of town, surrounded by tall trees and the fading sounds of crickets. He made himself a cup of coffee and turned on the TV. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman on the roadside. Something about her nervousness, the way she kept looking around, felt odd, but he quickly dismissed the thought. There was no reason to worry, he told himself that night. The sky outside was clear and full of stars. Daniel sat by the window for a while before going to bed. He thought about how good it felt to help someone, maybe tomorrow. He'd visit his mom again and tell her about it, she always said. Good deeds find their way back to you. But the next morning, as the sun peeked through his curtains, Daniel heard a low rumble outside his house. Curious, he walked to the window. A sleek black SUV was parked across the street, its engine still running. The windows were tinted, and he couldn't see who was inside. For a moment, Daniel froze. A chill ran down his spine. He didn't recognize the vehicle, and none of his neighbors owned something that fancy. Slowly, the SUV door opened, and two men stepped out, both wearing dark suits and sunglasses. They looked serious, too serious for a friendly visit. Daniel's heartbeat quickened as one of them glanced directly toward his house. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. His simple act of kindness had somehow drawn attention he never expected. And as he stood there, staring through the curtains, Daniel had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The morning sun was barely up when Daniel Turner noticed the black SUV parked across the street. It sat there like a shadow, quiet and still. He stood behind his curtain, watching the tinted windows, wondering who could be inside. He didn't know anyone who owned such a vehicle, especially in his small neighborhood where people drove old pickup trucks and family sedans. Minutes passed and the SUV didn't move. Daniel told himself maybe it was a lost visitor or someone waiting for directions. But when two men stepped out, his stomach tightened. Both wore black suits, polished shoes, and dark sunglasses, even though the sunlight was weak. They looked out of place and too professional. Too serious. Daniel quickly moved away from the window. His mind began racing. Had he done something wrong? Was this about work, taxes, or that parking ticket he forgot to pay months ago? He tried to laugh it off, but unease crawled up his spine. Then came the knock, firm, steady, and confident. The kind of knock that doesn't ask but demands attention. He took a deep breath and opened the door. "Mr. Daniel Turner?" The taller man asked. His voice was calm, but his tone carried authority. The shorter one stood beside him, holding a small black folder. "Yes, that's me," Daniel replied cautiously. "Is something wrong?" The tall man flashed a badge. "We're from the Federal Security Division," he said. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about yesterday." Daniel blinked. "Yesterday? You mean Sunday?" he asked, confused. The man nodded. "Yes, the incident on Route 16. You assisted a woman with a flat tire, correct?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, I helped a woman named Rebecca. She was stranded. I just changed her tire. What's this about?" he asked, trying to sound calm, but his heartbeat was racing. The two men exchanged a brief glance. Then the one with the folder spoke. "We appreciate your cooperation, sir, but we'd like you to come with us for a few questions at our office." Daniel stepped back slightly. "Wait, hold on. I didn't do anything wrong." "What's going on?" he said firmly. The taller man's expression softened a little. "You're not in trouble, Mr. Turner, but the woman you helped yesterday is involved in an ongoing investigation. We just need to clarify a few details." Those words hit Daniel like cold water. "Investigation? What kind of investigation?" He tried to remember Rebecca's face, her nervous eyes, the way she kept glancing around. The puzzle pieces began to form in his mind. Maybe she wasn't just a stranded woman after all. He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let me grab my jacket," he said quietly. The men stepped back, waiting by the SUV. Daniel locked his house and climbed into the back seat. The interior smelled faintly of leather and new car polish. The vehicle started moving and silence filled the air. After a few minutes, Daniel spoke. "So what kind of trouble is she in?" The shorter agent replied, "I'm afraid we can't share much, but we believe she might be connected to a financial crime network. She's been under surveillance for months. Yesterday she vanished. You were the last person seen with her." Daniel's eyes widened. "That's impossible. I just helped her change a tire, that's all." "She left after that," he said quickly. The taller man turned slightly. "We don't think you're involved, Mr. Turner, but any detail you remember could help us. Did she say where she was going?" Daniel tried to recall. "She said she was driving back from her sister's place, but she looked scared, like she was running from something," he said honestly. The men took notes, their faces unreadable. When they arrived at the agency building, Daniel was escorted into a small room with a metal table and two chairs. It felt like something out of a detective movie. A camera blinked in the corner. The shorter man sat across from him, flipping open the folder. Inside were photos, security camera shots of Rebecca, and some taken from different angles that looked official. "Is this the woman you helped?" the agent asked. Daniel leaned forward and nodded. "Yes, that's her," he said. The agent tapped the photo with his pen. "Her real name isn't Rebecca. It's Natalia Romanov," he said slowly. "She's wanted for questioning in connection with a major corporate fraud case involving millions of dollars." Daniel stared in disbelief. His mouth went dry. He couldn't speak for a few seconds. The woman he had helped, the one who looked scared and helpless, was a suspect in a federal case. "I didn't know, I swear," Daniel finally said, his voice trembling slightly. The agents nodded. "We believe you, Mr. Turner. But you may be in danger if she contacts you." "Call us immediately," the taller one said. "She's not someone who disappears quietly." As Daniel left the building, his thoughts spun wildly. What had he gotten himself into? He only wanted to help someone, but now his life was tangled with a mystery he didn't understand. That night, as he sat in his living room, he couldn't stop thinking about her face and the fear in her eyes. Somewhere out there, the woman he helped was still running, and Daniel knew deep down this wasn't the last time he would hear from her. That night, Daniel Turner could barely sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind. The agent's words echoed like thunder. "She's not someone who disappears quietly." He turned in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a small act of kindness could turn into such a strange nightmare. Outside, the wind howled softly against the windows. The world seemed calm, but Daniel's thoughts were anything but. He kept asking himself questions he couldn't answer. Who was Natalia Romanov really? Why was she so scared that day? And why did she have to cross his path of all people? Around midnight, Daniel finally drifted into a restless sleep. But only for a few hours. He woke suddenly to the sharp buzz of his phone on the nightstand. The clock read 2:17 a.m. His heart skipped a beat as he picked it up. The number on the screen was unknown. He hesitated, then swiped to answer. Hello? His voice was low and tired. For a few seconds there was only silence, then a whisper, soft, shaky, and familiar. Daniel. It's me. The voice sent chills down his spine. Rebecca? He said instinctively, but then he corrected himself. I mean, Natalia? Yes, she whispered. Please, don't hang up. Daniel sat up straight, his pulse pounding in his ears. What do you want from me? The agents came today. They said you're wanted for something serious, he said quickly. His voice was a mix of anger and confusion. I know, she said, her voice trembling. But it's not what they think. I didn't steal anything, Daniel. I was trying to expose people who did. They framed me. I can't trust anyone. Not even the police, Daniel rubbed his face, trying to make sense of it. Then why call me? I barely know you, he said. There was a pause. Because you helped me when no one else did, she replied softly. You stopped when everyone else drove past. I knew I could trust you. Her words struck something inside him. He wanted to believe her, but his mind screamed caution. Look, Natalia, the agents told me to report if you contacted me. You need to turn yourself in. Running will only make things worse, he said firmly. I can't, she said quickly. They'll kill me before I reach a station. Daniel, please, there's a USB drive in my car, hidden under the passenger seat. It has everything, the documents, the evidence, the names. You need to get it before they do. Daniel's breath caught. What? No, I can't get involved in this. I'm not part of this mess, he replied. But her voice broke through his hesitation. Please, Daniel, you don't understand. If they find it first, they'll destroy it, and me with it, before he could respond. The line went dead. The call ended abruptly, leaving Daniel staring at his phone in silence. His hands were shaking. He felt trapped between two worlds, one where he minded his own business, and another where doing nothing could cost someone's life. He sat there for a long time, the clock ticking loudly in the background. Finally, he muttered, "What are you doing, Daniel?" and grabbed his jacket. He couldn't explain it. But something deep inside told him she was telling the truth. He needed to see for himself. The night was cold as he drove toward the stretch of highway where he'd helped her. The road was empty, the same faint glow from the streetlights flickering in the distance. He parked by the spot where she'd been stranded. His flashlight cut through the darkness as he looked around. There was no car, but the faint marks of a tire change were still visible on the gravel. He searched the area but found nothing. Then he remembered. She said the USB was hidden under the passenger seat. Maybe her car had been towed or taken. He couldn't just wander around, he needed to think smart. He noted the plate number he'd seen before, 6B2 LVR, and planned to check the nearby towing lots in the morning. As he drove back home, he kept glancing in his mirror. The road behind him was empty. Until it wasn't, headlights appeared in the distance. Growing brighter, they stayed behind him, matching his every turn. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. It's nothing. Just another car, he whispered to himself. But when he turned into a smaller road toward his house, the headlights followed. His heart raced. He pressed the gas and turned sharply onto a dirt path leading behind the trees. The other vehicle slowed, then disappeared. He waited for a few minutes before heading home. When he finally parked and stepped inside, his phone buzzed again. A new message flashed on the screen. It was from an unknown number, just like before. 4 words glowed against the dark screen. They know? Be careful, Daniel froze. The message was short, but its meaning was clear. Someone else was watching. And the more he tried to stay out of it, the deeper he was already in. He set the phone down, his hands trembling. The wind outside had grown stronger, whistling through the trees. He knew sleep would not come again tonight. He sat by the window staring into the darkness, wondering who was out there and what was coming next. The next morning, Daniel Turner woke up with a heavy head and tired eyes. The message from last night still haunted him. They know. Be careful. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone, wondering who had sent it, Natalia, or someone else who was also watching him. Either way, it meant one thing. He wasn't safe anymore. The morning light felt colder than usual. He made himself a cup of coffee but could barely drink it. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floor, made him tense. His mind kept going back to Natalia's voice. Her desperate plea for him to find the USB. Under the passenger seat, she had said. He had to find that car, but he couldn't go to the police. Not after what the agents told him, if she was truly innocent. Then someone powerful was trying to erase her. And now maybe him too. After a few minutes of pacing around, he grabbed his jacket, keys, and a small flashlight. All right, Daniel. One last time, he whispered to himself. He started with the nearest towing yard on the outskirts of town. The air smelled like oil and rust. Rows of damaged cars sat like forgotten skeletons. A bearded man at the counter looked up from his newspaper. You looking for something? He asked. Daniel nodded. Yeah. A silver sedan, plate number 6B2LVR. Got towed off Route 16 yesterday, maybe. The man flipped through his logbook, then squinted. Yeah, came in late last night. Flat tire, no owner showed up. Lot number 27, Daniel's heart skipped. Can I take a look? He asked. The man shrugged. Go ahead, just don't take anything. Cameras are everywhere. Daniel walked down the narrow aisle between old cars until he spotted it. The silver sedan. Dusty and quiet. He checked over his shoulder before opening the passenger door. It creaked slightly. He crouched down, reaching under the seat. His fingers brushed something metallic. He pulled it out, a small black USB drive wrapped in tape. His chest tightened. He had found it. For a moment, he just stared at it, realizing how dangerous it could be. This little thing might hold secrets powerful enough to ruin people, or save them. He slipped it into his pocket and closed the door, trying to act normal. But as he turned back, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A black SUV parked near the lot entrance. The same kind he had seen outside his house. His pulse quickened. The men hadn't seen him yet. He ducked between two trucks and waited, watching from the shadows. Two figures stepped out. The same agents. Or maybe not, they looked similar. But these men carried an edge. Their eyes scanned the yard like hunters. One of them spoke into a radio. She's not here, but the car is. Check inside. Daniel's heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears. He couldn't stay, not with the USB on him. He waited until they turned away, then slipped quietly toward the fence. He spotted a loose section at the corner, pushed through and ran to the woods behind the yard. His breath came fast and heavy, branches scratching his arms as he pushed forward. When he finally reached his truck parked down the road, he started it quickly and drove off. His hands were shaking on the wheel. He didn't know where to go. Home was too risky now. He needed somewhere quiet, somewhere they wouldn't look. He drove toward an old cabin his father used to own near the lake, a place no one had visited in years. The cabin stood surrounded by pine trees. Half covered in moss, it smelled of old wood and memories. He locked the door, sat at the dusty table, and placed the USB in front of him. It looked ordinary, small, harmless, silent, yet it carried the weight of danger. He turned on his old laptop, its screen flickering to life, and plugged in the USB. At first nothing happened, then a folder appeared, labeled Truth. Inside were dozens of files, spreadsheets, scanned documents, emails, and one video file named Project Helios. Daniel clicked it. The screen showed Natalia, her face pale but determined, speaking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, she said, I'm probably being hunted. These files expose a group inside a major energy corporation. They've been stealing funds and using shell companies to hide their tracks. I tried to report it, but they silenced everyone who knew, including me. Her eyes filled with fear. Trust no one from the agency, they're part of it too. Daniel froze. Her words hit like a storm. The agents, the black SUV, the warning message, and it all made sense now. He wasn't caught in a misunderstanding. He was caught in a cover-up. Suddenly, a loud knock shattered the silence. Daniel's head snapped toward the door. His laptop screen still glowed with Natalia's video. He grabbed the USB and yanked it out just before the door handle began to turn. He looked around the cabin, heart racing. He had nowhere to hide. The next knock was harder, followed by a familiar voice calling from outside. Mr. Turner, it's Agent Reed, we just need to talk. Daniel didn't move. He knew one thing for sure. The people outside that door weren't here to talk. They were here to make sure the truth never came out. Daniel Turner stood frozen inside the dim cabin, the old wooden floor creaking under his feet. The voice outside repeated, "Mr. Turner, please open the door. We just need to talk." But Daniel could hear something off. The tone wasn't calm or official anymore. It carried urgency, maybe even threat. His eyes darted around the cabin, searching for a way out. The windows were small and old, the glass clouded with dust. He moved quietly toward the back, clutching the small USB tightly in his hand. Every second felt like thunder. The laptop still glowed faintly on the table, showing the frozen image of Natalia's terrified face. Then came the sound he feared, the door handle rattling harder, followed by a sharp metallic click. Someone was picking the lock. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew he had only moments. He slipped the USB into his boot, pulled on his jacket, and backed toward the rear window. The door burst open with a violent crash. 2 men stormed in, their flashlights cutting through the dusty air. "Daniel Turner, Federal Security Division," one shouted. But their movements were too aggressive for agents following standard protocol. Daniel stayed low and crawled behind an old couch. Watching them from the shadows, the taller man kicked over a chair. His voice sharp, "Search everything. He's here somewhere." The other man opened drawers, flipping things carelessly. Dust filled the air as papers and old photo frames hit the floor. Daniel's breathing grew shallow. If they found him, it was over. Through the broken window frame, he could see the backwoods stretching behind the cabin. His only chance was to get outside quietly. He took one deep breath and slipped through the narrow opening. The wood scraped his jacket, but he didn't stop. Once outside, he crouched low and started running toward the trees. Behind him, a voice shouted, "He's escaping!" A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. Daniel ran faster, his boots pounding the damp ground. Branches whipped against his arms, the cold night air burning his lungs. Shots rang out, sharp cracks echoing through the forest. Bark splintered near him and he ducked, heart hammering. He didn't dare look back. The forest felt endless, only the moonlight guiding his way. He stumbled down a slope, nearly falling into a shallow creek. The icy water soaked his shoes, but he kept moving. When the sound of footsteps grew distant, he finally stopped to catch his breath for a moment. All he could hear was the sound of his heartbeat and the rustling of leaves. He leaned against a tree, chest heaving. His mind was spinning. They were never real agents, he whispered to himself. She was right. He reached into his boot and pulled out the USB. It was still there, cold and lifeless in his hand. But he knew it was the reason for everything. The reason she was running. The reason they wanted him silenced. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around. He couldn't stay in the woods forever. He needed help. But he didn't know who to trust anymore. The thought of Natalia came back to him, her voice in the recording. Trust no one from the agency. He needed to find her if she was still alive. She might be the only one who knew how to end this. He followed the creek downstream until he reached an old service road. A single streetlight flickered near a gas station sign. He walked toward it, shivering from the cold. The man behind the counter looked up as Daniel entered. "Rough night, buddy?" he said with a casual grin. Daniel tried to sound normal. "Yeah, you could say that. Can I use your phone?" The man nodded, handing it over. Daniel dialed the only number he had memorized from last night, the one that had sent him the message. It rang twice, then a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have gone to the cabin." Daniel froze. "Who is this?" he demanded. The voice replied calmly, "They were tracking you. You need to get rid of the USB. They'll never stop until you do." His grip tightened around the receiver. "I can't. This drive has proof. I saw it myself," he said. There was a long silence. Then the voice spoke again. "Then you better start running again, because they're already on their way." The line went dead. Daniel turned slowly toward the glass window of the gas station and saw the reflection of headlights approaching fast. The same black SUV screeched to a stop outside. Daniel dropped the phone and bolted toward the back door. The clerk shouted something, but Daniel didn't stop. He burst into the alley, the sound of heavy footsteps following behind. The night swallowed him again, the cold air cutting through his lungs. He darted between dumpsters, climbed a fence, and disappeared into another row of trees. Behind him, the men shouted orders, but the forest hid him like a shadow. Daniel ran until his legs felt like fire. When he finally stopped near a narrow riverbank, he looked down at the USB again. The small device glimmered faintly under the moonlight. What are you worth? He whispered bitterly. And how many lives will you take before the truth comes out? He tucked it back into his pocket, watching his breath form clouds in the cold air. Somewhere out there, Natalia was still hiding, somewhere. The truth waited to be revealed. But one thing was certain now. Daniel Turner was no longer just a man who helped a stranger on the road. He was the only person standing between the truth and the people trying to bury it. The night felt endless as Daniel Turner sat near the riverbank. His clothes wet and his body trembling from exhaustion. He had been running for hours, hiding like a fugitive for a crime he never committed. The USB drive lay in his hand, a small, lifeless object that carried too much weight. The sky above him was gray with pre-dawn mist, and the silence around was broken only by the distant cry of an owl. He wanted to believe it was over, but he knew better. The men in the SUV would not stop, not until they got what they wanted. He looked at the reflection of the moon dancing on the water and whispered, "What do I do now?" His thoughts were interrupted by a sound behind him. A branch snapping under light footsteps. He turned quickly, heart pounding. His first instinct was to run again, but what he saw made him freeze. A shadow emerged from behind the trees. A woman, thin, weary, her hair messy and her eyes full of fear and recognition. "Natalia?" he whispered, barely believing his eyes. She looked exactly as she had on that roadside, except now she seemed even more fragile. Her hands were trembling and her face was pale. "Daniel," she said softly, stepping closer. "I didn't know if you were still alive." He stared at her in disbelief. "They said you vanished, that you were on the run," he said. "I should have known they'd find me through you." Natalia nodded weakly. "They've been tracking everything, even your phone. I tried to warn you." But it was too late. Daniel stepped closer, frustration in his voice. "You dragged me into this, Natalia. I was just trying to help you. Now they think I'm part of whatever you started." She lowered her gaze, guilt washing over her face. "I never meant for you to get hurt. I thought they'd ignore you. You were just a stranger who helped me. I didn't know they'd come after you too." Daniel sighed deeply. "They tore my house apart, chased me through the woods. They were at the cabin. I had to run for my life." Natalia's eyes widened. "The cabin? You went there?" She asked urgently. "Did you find it, the drive?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, and I watched your video. I know everything now." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then you understand why I couldn't go to the police. The corruption goes all the way up. They control everything. The agency, the media, even the courts. Anyone who tries to speak out disappears," she said. Her voice shaking, Daniel clenched his fists. "You should have left me out of this," he muttered. Now we're both targets, but deep down, he knew he couldn't abandon her, not now. The fear in her eyes wasn't fake, it was real. It was the same fear he'd felt when those men broke into the cabin. Natalia took a small envelope from her coat and handed it to him. "Inside, you'll find the contact of someone who can help us. His name's Dr. Harris. He used to work for them, but he switched sides. He knows everything about Project Helios, and he's been waiting for proof," she said. Daniel opened the envelope slightly, seeing a name, an address, and a number scribbled on a torn paper. He looked at her uncertain. "And what about you? Where will you go?" She looked toward the trees. "They're close. I can't stay in one place. You need to meet Harris. Give him the USB and whatever happens. Don't let them catch you." Daniel shook his head. "No, we go together," he insisted. But Natalia took a step back, her eyes glistening in the faint light. "You don't understand. If they find us together, it's over for both of us, but if we split, at least one of us has a chance to make it." Before Daniel could respond, a distant engine roared. Headlights flashed through the trees. Growing brighter, Natalia's eyes widened. "They found us," she whispered. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the river. "This way!" They ran along the bank, splashing through the shallow water. The sound of engines grew louder behind them, followed by shouts and beams of light cutting through the mist. Natalia stumbled, but Daniel caught her arm. "Keep going," he yelled. They reached a narrow wooden bridge. Half broken and slick with moss, Natalia turned to him, breathing hard. "When I say run, you don't look back," she said. Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm not leaving you again." But before he could say more, a bullet whizzed past them, hitting the railing. Natalia flinched. "Run!" she screamed. Daniel hesitated, torn between survival and guilt, then she pushed him forward. "Go, Daniel." He ran across the bridge, his boots slipping. Behind him, Natalia fired a warning shot from a small pistol. The agents shouted, returning fire. The bridge groaned under the chaos. Then, a loud crack echoed as one of the beams snapped. Daniel turned just in time to see the bridge collapse. Natalia fell into the dark river below. Her scream was swallowed by the rush of water. "Natalia!" He shouted desperately, but she was gone. The SUV lights flashed on the far bank. Voices yelling orders. Daniel had no time. He ran into the woods, his heart breaking and his mind spinning. She had sacrificed herself to save him. The USB in his pocket now felt heavier than ever as he disappeared into the forest. One thought echoed in his mind. She wasn't gone forever. Not Natalia Romanov. If she survived, she'd find him again, and together, they'd finish what they started. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, spilling faint light across the forest where Daniel Turner had spent the night hiding. His clothes were torn, his body bruised, and his heart heavy. The sound of rushing water still echoed in his ears, Natalia's scream haunting him over and over. He sat by a fallen tree, holding the USB in his hands, the last thing she had trusted him with. He wanted to believe she was alive, but deep down, doubt gnawed at him still. He couldn't stop now. Natalia had given her life for this, and he wasn't going to let it be for nothing. He opened the crumpled envelope she had given him and looked again at the note inside. Dr. Michael Harris, 27 Maplewood Drive, Haven City. Daniel knew it was risky. Haven City was hours away, and the men chasing him would expect him to run there. But it was his only lead. He had to take the chance. He started walking toward a nearby highway, keeping to the trees, avoiding cameras and people. By afternoon, he managed to hitch a ride with a truck driver heading toward Haven. The driver was an older man with kind eyes. "You look like you've been through a war," he said with a laugh. Daniel forced a tired smile. "Something like that," he replied quietly. He kept his answers short, never mentioning names. When they reached the city outskirts, Daniel thanked him and slipped away, blending into the crowd. By the time he reached Maplewood Drive, the sky was turning orange again. The address led him to a small clinic surrounded by tall trees. The sign outside read Dr. Michael Harris, research consultant. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then knocked after a pause. An older man with glasses opened the door. His sharp eyes studied Daniel carefully. "Dr. Harris?" Daniel asked. The man nodded slowly. "Who's asking?" Daniel reached into his pocket and showed the folded note Natalia had written. The doctor's expression changed instantly. He stepped aside and gestured for Daniel to come in. "Quickly," he said in a low voice. Inside, the clinic was quiet and dim. Papers and charts covered the desk. The faint hum of machines filled the background. Dr. Harris locked the door behind them. "You have no idea how dangerous it is for you to be here," he said. Daniel nodded. "I think I do," he replied. Pulling the USB from his pocket, the doctor's eyes widened. "She gave it to you?" he asked. "She did," Daniel said softly. "But she's gone. They found us last night." Dr. Harris closed his eyes, a mix of grief and anger crossing his face. "I warned her not to involve anyone else, but she never listened," he murmured. Then he straightened. "Come. We don't have much time." He plugged the USB into his computer. The screen filled with files, documents, and encrypted reports. Dr. Harris clicked rapidly, unlocking each one. "Project Helios," he whispered. This was supposed to be a clean energy project, but it was never about the environment. Daniel leaned closer. "Then what was it about?" The doctor sighed. "Money and power, the corporation behind it, Solar Tech Industries, faked research results to win billions in government funding. They redirected the money through shell companies and offshore accounts. Natalia was one of our lead analysts. She discovered the fraud and tried to report it. That's when everything changed." He showed Daniel an image on the screen, a list of names and bank transfers. "These are the people involved," he continued. "Politicians, security officials, even some in the federal division. They created fake reports to cover their tracks, and when Natalia went public, they branded her a criminal." Daniel's chest tightened. "So the agents who came after me weren't agents," Harris finished for him. "They were hired by Solar Tech's private security wing. They're cleaning up every loose end." Suddenly, the lights flickered. Dr. Harris froze. "They're here," he whispered. Daniel looked toward the window. A pair of black SUVs had pulled up outside. "How did they find us?" he asked. Harris quickly disconnected the USB and handed it back. They've been monitoring the drive signal. Go now. Daniel hesitated. What about you? Harris gave him a sad smile. I'm old. I've been hiding too long. You're faster. You can still make it out. There's a journalist. Her name is Clara Miles, Channel 7. She's the only one brave enough to expose this. Find her. Give her the drive. The pounding started on the door. Harris shoved Daniel toward the back exit. Go, he shouted. Daniel ran through the narrow hallway as the door burst open behind him. He heard shouting, followed by gunfire. The windows shattered. Daniel ducked and sprinted toward the woods behind the clinic, clutching the USB. The night swallowed him once again. His lungs burned. But he didn't stop running. Behind him, flames began to rise from the clinic, lighting up the dark sky. He turned once, seeing the building collapse. His stomach twisted. Harris had sacrificed himself just like Natalia. Now it was all on him. The truth, the evidence, the fight for justice. He knew one thing, when if he failed, they all died for nothing. Daniel took one deep breath and whispered into the cold night. I'll finish what you started. Rain poured over the city as Daniel Turner ran through the narrow streets. The USB clutched tightly in his hand. His jacket was soaked, his hair dripping, but he didn't care. Behind him, distant sirens wailed, echoing through the night like a warning. He knew time was running out. Dr. Harris was gone. His sacrifice still burned in Daniel's mind. The clinic had been destroyed. The files erased, except for what he carried. The last piece of truth, the last hope to bring everything to light. He remembered Harris's final words clearly. Find Clara Miles, Channel 7. She's the only one who'll listen. He turned the corner and spotted the large building with bright neon letters. Channel 7 News. The guards at the front entrance eyed him suspiciously. Daniel's clothes were muddy and he looked half crazed. But before they could stop him, he shouted, I need to see Clara Miles. It's about Project Helios. The name caught their attention. One of the guards hesitated, then called someone on the radio a moment later. A woman in her mid-30s appeared in the lobby. Her sharp eyes studied Daniel with curiosity. You said Project Helios? She asked. Who are you? Daniel caught his breath. My name's Daniel Turner. I have proof and files, names, everything. But they're coming for me, please, just give me 5 minutes, he said. His voice trembled but carried urgency. Clara hesitated, then nodded. Follow me, she said, leading him through the glass doors and up to her office. Inside, Daniel handed her the USB. It's all here, corporate fraud, stolen government funds, and the people covering it up, he said. Clara plugged it into her computer, and her expression shifted from doubt to shock as she opened the files. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through document after document. This is real, she whispered. These are federal names, Daniel nodded. 2 people died trying to get this out, Natalia Romanoff and Dr. Harris. They trusted me to finish it. Clara looked at him in disbelief. Natalia Romanoff? She's been missing for months. They said she fled the country. Daniel shook his head. No, they silenced her. She was the whistleblower, before she could respond. The lights flickered. A loud bang echoed from downstairs. Clara's assistant burst in. There are men in the lobby, armed. They're looking for someone. Daniel's stomach turned. They found me, he said. Clara grabbed her phone and whispered. Security locked down the building. Now the next few minutes felt like a blur. The hallway filled with panic as staff rushed for safety. Clara pulled Daniel toward the editing room. If we can get the broadcast live. They can't stop it, she said. Once it's out, the whole world will know. Daniel followed her, every nerve screaming in fear. Inside the studio, Clara plugged the USB into the system. The big screens flickered to life. She turned to Daniel. We'll air it straight, no cuts, no delays. The sound of footsteps grew louder outside. Daniel could hear them shouting orders. Hurry! He said. Clara hit the final key, and the broadcast went live across the city. TV screens changed to show confidential files, photos, and Natalia's recorded video message. Her voice echoed through every speaker. If you're watching this, it means the truth is finally free. Daniel stood frozen, watching her face fill the screen. Her eyes were tired but brave. They tried to bury this project, to silence us. But the truth always finds a way, she said. Clara looked at Daniel, tears glimmering in her eyes. You did it, she whispered, but before Daniel could respond, the studio door burst open. The men in suits stormed in, shouting for them to step away from the console. Daniel moved instinctively, blocking their view. It's too late, he said, his voice steady. The world already knows. One of the men aimed his weapon. You should have stayed quiet, he growled. But just as he pulled the trigger, the sound of police sirens filled the air outside. Within seconds, officers flooded the building. The men tried to escape, but they were surrounded. The tide had turned. Hours later, as dawn broke, Daniel sat on the station steps wrapped in a blanket. The city buzzed with chaos, reporters, police, and flashing lights everywhere. Clara sat beside him holding a cup of coffee. The whole country's talking about it, she said softly. Project Helios is trending on every network. They can't hide it anymore. Daniel looked up at the brightening sky, his eyes tired but peaceful. She was right, he murmured. The truth always finds a way. Clara smiled faintly. What will you do now? She asked. He looked at her, then at the city beyond. I think I'll disappear for a while, maybe find a quiet road to drive again, he said. Then after a pause, he added, if Natalia made it, she'll know it's safe now. As he walked away through the early morning mist, the first rays of sunlight touched the streets, illuminating a new day. The world had changed, and so had he. The man who once stopped to help a stranger on the roadside had become the voice of justice for an entire nation. And somewhere, far from the noise of the city, a woman watched the news broadcast from an old cabin by the river, her eyes filled with tears and pride. You did it, Daniel, she whispered, a faint smile crossing her lips. The truth was out, the lies were exposed, and for the first time in a long while, the world felt a little more awake.